Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Podcast. We're back with an NFL season preview. We're going to start out in fantasy football. We bring with us, long by his absence, but back and ready to go, refreshed, Achilles Reign. Are you ready to get into some NFL football? I know you've been miserable the last couple months without it.
Oh, buddy, it's been so long since we've had football, and it's just now around the corner. I can't wait. I'm really excited, and I have to admit, I'm a little nervous to get back into, the flow of things, but I'm definitely excited to get back into it.
Yeah, well, we're going to ease you back in right here, and we're just going to talk a little fantasy football. I don't think it's either of our probably favorite things to sort of do in the footballing world, but anyway, it'll break us back into NFL football. We'll get to go over some of the players who we think will do well and won't do well. And then our previews start this Friday. I believe we're doing AFC East, NFC East. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right based off the schedule you sent, Big Boss Man.
Well, I have a lot of people telling me what shows. David comes up to me every day and is like, blah, blah, blah. So I got to have a little check on what show we're recording when. So AFC East, NFC East, our football preview begins, and then we'll do two divisions each week until the start of the season. And I think right there, right before the season kicks off, we'll do a little bit of individual player awards, which probably ties in a little bit here with our fantasy football preview.
Oh, yeah. I'm really excited. It feels like it's been forever, and I know that this whole pandemic thing probably didn't help, but the offseason did kind of fly by if you really just kind of stopped and looked at the whole situation with the draft and the combine and all that. We didn't hear a lot of noise because of COVID, but to some of us it felt really long. But now in retrospect, I think it kind of flew by.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, so let's get into some fantasy football. So what is your history with fantasy football? How did you get started? When did you get started?
Oh, man. So, now I don't have as much time for fantasy. I tend to do more of the daily thing now, but fantasy was my go-to. I loved fantasy football. And I think for a lot of people, fantasy got them a little more closer to the game. I know that for me, it opened my eyes to a lot of different players. As you know, and as a lot of people know, I'm a Ram fan. And back when I started playing, they were still in St. Louis. So I knew about the St. Louis players, the Marshall Faulks, the Steven Jacksons, the Mark Bolgers, those guys. And I didn't really know anybody outside of the NFC West. So for me, fantasy football really kind of opened up the floodgates, so to speak, as far as all the other teams in the NFL. And it gave me a greater appreciation for not just the talent out there, but the competitiveness and the skill that it actually takes to be one of these top players. So that's how fantasy impacted me. And again, this was a long time ago, but I still remember like it's yesterday, and I still have my account. So every now and then I'll log in and go and look at my trophies. But what about you?
Well, as you might imagine, I got into it at a very, very young age. It was actually the first thing I really, really got into. We're talking like really early 90s before we even had the fun of the computer to make this much, much easier.
I was going to ask, did you get into it around the time where you had to like grab the newspaper and then, kind of add up the stats on your own?
Yes. In like fifth grade, anybody who probably is 35 or older, the Sporting News, used to publish their little newspaper thing weekly, and they'd have that little fantasy football thing where you did it by salary cap, and you added it up, and a handful of us goofballs all made our own league and built our teams and sort of tried to do the stats every week. As you might imagine, it didn't make it too long in there. Shady shenanigans were going on, and everybody thought everybody else was cheating on the stats. But I guess that's what you get when you get fifth and sixth graders doing the stats. But I really got into it. And then once the internet sort of hit, and you got to be able to do your drafts and stuff online. They aren't as clean and smooth as they were back in that mid 90s period. They didn't even have the players like ranked. You had to literally go name. And then if you had players of the same name, it was, it was a fun chore to find somebody. So back to those days. And then as it got modern, I think I got a little bit less and less into it as, more and more stuff came out, and it wasn't quite as fun. You couldn't be the knowledgeable, smart dude, because pretty much anybody who had a computer could go look up and find the same information as you could. So since then, I still like to play it. I make a couple teams every year, but I'm not quite as dedicated to it all week. I'm more like on Sunday at 12:45. I'll set my team and make my roster changes.
Now, I will say this, okay, and this is just me, but there are moments when I do miss like the old fantasy football style, because now when you think about fantasy, and I think pretty much anyone out there, when you think about fantasy, you think about this daily fantasy, which kind of really came into play a few years back. I like it. I enjoy it because it's sort of gambling. Now we're in a state that allows gambling, so I can say that, but it's basically a form of gambling. But I do miss the old school way, where you kind of got together with 10 friends or 12 friends and you built a league and you guys had your draft. Draft day was a holiday back when we were playing fantasy. I mean, we had it marked down our calendar. We all planned for it. We even had a couple draft day moments where we all got together in one restaurant and had like a little draft party. So I do miss that about it, but it was very time consuming. And the older I've gotten, it seems like I just don't have enough time to be able to keep up with one of those.
Yeah, that was my next question. I was going to ask, had you ever done like a live draft party with all your friends together? We did that a handful of times. It was probably always the best because you'd always have a couple schmoes in there who'd always take some guy who got taken 4 rounds previous, and you're like, dude, come on.
He's off the board, bro. He's off the board.
So yeah. Speaking of, what's your sort of favorite style of draft do you do? Are you a snake guy? Are you an auction guy? Did you like the old school sort of salary cap thing back in the day? I always sort of was fond of that, but, that might be my old school nostalgia as I was a 10-year-old kid, fooling around too.
Well, when I really got into fantasy, we had just gotten past that, salary kind of phase. And we were into the snake phase, and and auction was starting to really pick up. But I'm a snake guy. I've always thought, because like again, we went, go back to the leagues that we did. We had these, consistent players, playing in the league. We kind of went off last year's rankings to get the number 1 pick and things of that sort. Again, this is just another thing I miss about it. With the snake draft, we were able to trade picks, for certain players. So, not if you had a team that was just completely stacked and you had some schmo that was trying to kind of get into the playoffs, you could, dangle, a nice running back and be like, oh, hey, give me next year's first round pick and you can get this guy who'll get you to the playoffs. So you had all these things that made you feel like what we called a couch GM back then. So I miss all that about it. Definitely snake is my preference, but I could see why other people would be fond of the other ones. It takes a lot of strategy.
Yeah. Snake would be the one I do. But my favorite, I love the auction draft, but anyone who's been in an auction draft with 10, 12, 14 teams, that thing takes like half a day to go through. And while I love the strategy of the auction draft and sort of how you manipulate your money, I pretty much will do one auction draft, one snake draft, and then maybe a flyer on 1 or 2 others. But I'm definitely a snake because it goes in about 20 to 30 minutes instead of, the 6-7 hour type auction drafts.
And a lot of people did think that the snake draft wasn't as strategical, but it really was. Like if you were a guy who had the first pick, you'd have to sit there and wait for everyone to go through a pick, and then you come back to it, and there'd be a moment where you had back-to-back picks, and you could kind of build a team where you can draft based off your team needs and get yourself a couple good guys. The problem with that was that then you'd have to wait so long to your next pick, and you were probably missing out on a lot of other good guys. So there was a lot of anxiety between those rounds, but it was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, so let's get into 2021 and some fantasy stuff. Position-wise, where would you go in your draft, early-wise? Are you a running back man this year? Are you a quarterback guy? What do you think your strategy will be this year?
Well, ever since I started playing fantasy, one thing I learned very early on was how important running backs are. And as time has progressed, as time has gone on, we've noticed that the running backs have been used less and less, and you see it also play into real life. Running backs don't have the type of value that they once had when it comes to the actual draft itself. Now, in fantasy terms, I think even though it's changed, it's still pretty much the same thing. Running backs, I think, are still king. Wide receivers, especially in PPR, which is what I usually play, they're pretty much a dime a dozen. You can, and I'm not saying there's always the elite guys, but you can always find yourself. I remember at one point I got myself a Wes Welker with the last pick in the draft, and Wes Welker was the guy who was pulling in about 100 catches a season, it seemed. So in the PPR league, I think that running back is still king, for all formats, I believe that running back is still king. And as they get rarer and rarer to see the type of running attacks that we used to see in the NFL, I think that's going to remain to hold true, that running back is king, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm old school like you. Running back always remains king. I probably have gone running back a majority of my life, both, if I'm spending a lot of money auction wise or in, just a snake draft. I usually go running back, definitely so. And I think even more so, I mean, receiver is used much more now than back in, our younger days in the, late 90s, early 2000s. But I think that just makes running backs even more valuable because there's probably only, I'd say 5 or 6 who you truly know are going to be, 3-4 down, running backs. So that makes them so scarce. And, the receiver pool, now, is just huge. You might not be able to pull, like an elite Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs if you don't grab them in the first, second round or bid high up for them. But I mean, you drop down there, you can just load up with guys who are going to get 80, 90 catches a year, get their 1,000 yards, probably get 6 to 8 touchdowns a season. And I don't think I'd really ever take a wide receiver in the first round. You could probably convince me quarterback, maybe if you were going with like an elite type Mahomes, who you're getting 40 touchdowns. Breeze back in his day. Breeze no longer. Do not draft Drew Brees.
There's going to be some guy out there who's taking him off the board during their draft party. I'm taking Drew Brees.
But Breeze back in the day, who consistently would get 35 to 40 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. But it's just, I think so much so the drop off between, a Dalvin Cook or Christian McCaffrey last year excluded, dropping down to even, the second tier of a DeAndre Swift or Darrell Henderson. You just don't know what a DeAndre Swift or a Darrell Henderson are going to give you in the year. You know exactly what McCaffrey and Cook, injury aside, are going to give you. And that just point differential there. So I usually always go running back, definitely so.
Yeah, definitely. And you could make the case, I wouldn't argue with somebody who, like you said, picks up a quarterback in the first round, a guy and I'm going back to my fantasy days. A guy like a Michael Vick, for example,
Yeah.
a guy who is going to touch the ball uh, probably more than your average quarterback. Because when it came to fantasy, that was always my number one concern: is how many touches could he potentially get throughout an entire game? Now, for a running back, that most running backs, especially back in those days, they were averaging at least about 20 rushes per game. So they're going to get those 20 touches. Now, if you have a running back who can come out of the backfield and catch passes, it only adds that value. So to me, running back is king. You could definitely sell me on one of those elite quarterbacks. But as far as wide receivers, as tempting as some of those big names might be, I think you could always wait on a wide receiver, and you could kind of stack up on a bunch of those guys.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. So you ready to get into some position stuff? Let's start out with the quarterback. We talked about first round quarterbacks. I think Mahomes definitely would be one I'd look at in the first round. What about you? What guys would you look at in the first round as a quarterback if you were going to go that position? Maybe say you have the 6th, 7th, 8th pick. A couple of those top running backs are off the board, and maybe the thought of quarterback crosses your mind.
Yeah, I mean, if like you said, I'm a mid-round, position for the draft, and these elite running backs are all off the board. I wouldn't have an issue with drafting a guy like Aaron Rodgers. You look at what he did last season. Last season, he had a tremendous season statistically. He put up ridiculous numbers, and it seemed like it didn't really matter who was in and out of that wide receiver corps with injuries, and who the running back was. He was producing no matter what. So a guy like that, I would definitely feel very comfortable, even though he doesn't run the ball as much as he used to. He seems to be sneaking the ball in less and less, even when they get into the red zone. I still would feel very comfortable with a guy like him, who I know that can get it done with, even a makeshift wide receiver core.
Yeah, I have 3 guys I'd look at really up top. Rodgers would be one of them. Mahomes and then Allen would be there. If I was going to go first round, I don't know if I'd go with anyone probably but Mahomes in the first round, unless I'm really, really, your draft is your draft. Each person's draft is different. So, there's no telling what running backs are there. But I think Mahomes might be the only one I'd probably really take in the first round. Then I might drop. I'd probably look at Josh Allen. I'd just be a little bit concerned of a little bit of regression, not a ton of regression. I think in our preview, we're going to get to it. I think the Bills are easily probably the number 2 team in the AFC, but the numbers he put up last year were ridiculous. I look for his carries, rushing attempts to drop down a little bit. I don't know if they'll use him on the goal line quite as much to get those little 1-yard touchdowns, and those little things sort of affect your scoring ability throughout the fantasy football season. But Allen, Rodgers probably be the next crew I'd look in there. I'm curious a little bit. A lot of Kyler Murray love this year, and some people have him really up there. I think both of you had a bit of we were both a little mixed bag on Kyler Murray on last year. What are your thoughts on him as a fantasy football quarterback?
You can't go against the numbers, fantasy wise. Now, what you see on the field, just on, in regards to football itself, there's still a lot that I want to see before I'm completely sold on him as a NFL quarterback. Now, talking fantasy, the numbers don't lie. The guy puts up a lot of numbers. He's probably not winning the games, but in fantasy, wins and losses don't matter. The only wins that count are the ones against your opponent. So that doesn't matter. And just statistically speaking, he's putting up big numbers. This season, he's coming in, with another season under his belt with his star wide receiver. They added another wide receiver to their mix, which should, on paper at the least, provide him with the ability to, throw the ball deep or get more guys open. And if he put up those type of numbers last season, which were really good, I guess the potential for him to go even higher is there. So I see what the excitement's all about. Again, as a Ram fan who really kind of watches a lot of NFC West games, from a regular football point of view, I'm not as sold on him from a fantasy point of view. I completely understand why people are.
Yeah. Let's get into some younger guys. I'm curious on your thoughts on Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Burrow, second-year guys. Burrow coming off the injury. They did get it. I think we'll probably get into wide receiver and Jamar Chase and what we think are coming there. But I'm curious where you think you should probably go with a Herbert. A lot of sites have him as the 3 or 4 quarterback on the board. I don't know if I'm quite that high on Justin Herbert. I know his numbers were great. He was great. But we talked about regression with Josh Allen. I'm a little scared of regression with Justin Herbert a little bit this year. That being said, he does have a new coach. So without Anthony Lynn, no telling what that offense might be capable of. But I look.
Oh, come on! You love Anthony Lynn. What are you talking about?
I'm very curious about Tua. I think I would not use anything early or in the middle. But if I could steal a Tua after I already, take my actual starting quarterback, I think I'd grab a Tua just to see what that was. I have no idea what to do with Joe Burrow. He throws a lot. He's going to throw a lot, but I still worry how long that health will last throughout that season on him.
I mean, I'll tell you this much, okay? So we both were very down on the coaching decisions when it came to Joe Burrow last season. He was being used and abused pretty much game in and game out. But as the season progressed, he did definitely start picking up his play, and his numbers were looking a lot better. Now, he had the very unfortunate incident where he got hurt with that horrific, injury he had, and it put him out for the rest of the season. So what could have been, we don't know. In my opinion, right before that injury, he was probably heading towards Rookie of the Year for me. Now, we know who the actual Rookie of the Year was after it was all said and done. With all that being said, I always have a little bit of a pause when it comes to drafting these second and third year guys because we tend to see a little bit of a slump. In the NFL is all the coaching staffs, the strategy, the game plan, everything, film session, it progresses very quickly. And you give yourself an entire offseason to prepare for guys, to study guys, to look at film, and you start to learn certain tendencies that they have. So you see a little bit of regression. Not to mention the fact that pretty much every NFL team, with a few teams that for some reason don't like to improve, but pretty much every NFL team improves every single season. And that's only bad news for guys that are kind of, one-track ponies. Not saying that Herbert is, and I'm not saying that any of these guys are. They're very talented, obviously. But I do expect a little bit of a regression for all these guys. To Burrow, I don't know so much about Burrow because we didn't get to see him for an entire season. But Herbert, who I was really high on last season, I think I'm expecting a little bit of a regression there.
Yeah, I just would not take Herbert early. I think if I could get him in
as a bye week quarterback,
yeah,
that's probably where I'd feel comfortable.
If I could get him maybe as early as 6, 7, 8 round after I've got my sort of base initial team, and then I can add him in there, I probably would. But I wouldn't put him in the level that I'd put Mahomes and Allen and Aaron Rodgers. We'll probably get into Dak Prescott here in a second. But I just don't think that. I'd be way too scared on Joe Burrow. Into the draft as your second quarterback, I wouldn't worry about it, but I just don't think I could go there. But let's get into Dak Prescott. Let's go with Matthew Stafford as well and Jared Goff. One quarterback coming off a terrible injury and I guess no longer throwing footballs in training camp. Little worrying, but it is training camp. I don't like to make too many worries about that, but has to be a little alarming on the Dak Prescott front. Stafford, it's hard to say. I think numbers will be there. I heard some podcasts from Sean McVay, and where it is, he's going to throw the ball an awfully lot. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think there's going to be a lot of passing involved. And Jared Goff, that Lions team is atrocious, but no pressure. He can sort of wing it and sling it without much worry. What are your projections there on those three guys?
Okay, well, let's start off with Prescott. I'm not worried about Prescott. Now, if I was, talking to Fish right now, I would probably, blow it out of proportion and be like, oh, yeah, he's not throwing footballs. And, who comes back from an injury? Like, I would overplay it. Now, I'm not talking to Fish. I'm talking to Champ. So I'll be honest. I'm not worried about him. A veteran guy like him, a savvy guy like him, he's got everything he needs right up here. So I'm not worried about him. I think that as long as he's healthy to start the season, he'll be fine. He's got enough weapons. He's got, the trust of the coaching staff. He's got the trust of the ownership there. So I'm not concerned about him. I think he'll be fine if he's healthy and ready to go. Matthew Stafford, I was probably one of the few Ram fans out there who wasn't super excited about this move. Not that I didn't like it. I liked the move. I understand why it had to be made, but I was like, okay, what has Matthew Stafford done other than put up big numbers? How many wins has he put up? Jared Goff led us to a Super Bowl. His numbers weren't great, and I understand the defense helps that a lot. But as I've watched, practice film and things like that, yes, it is practice. It's just practice, so don't jump on me. I like what I'm seeing from him, and it's starting to get me pumped up. And I even, wife went out. She got me some brand new Ram socks, and I'm ready for the season to get started. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen there. I'm a little concerned about that finger injury that's going on, but they seem to think it's not a big deal. So we'll see what happens with the injury at the running back position. I feel like they're going to kind of throw it more on his shoulders. I don't know how he's going to handle the pressure of playing in a city like Los Angeles, where the expectations are high. You have a great defense. You have great players in Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. That defense is probably top tier. So if the offense can at least be competent, which is something we didn't really see last season from Jared Goff, I think they can make some noise. The Lions, I think you're right. With the team being as bad as they are, it's probably going to help Jared Goff. I think that the lights were a little too bright for him. I think the moment was a little too big for him, and it seems like he had his best moments when the pressure wasn't completely on him. Back when he had McVay in his ear, basically giving him every single play call to the last minute. That's when he was really performing well. Once that was kind of taken away and it was mostly on his shoulders, he seemed to really get shaky when the big moments came up. But in Detroit, with as bad as the team has been and the history they've had over the last couple decades, I think the pressure's off, and I think he's just going to come out there really relaxed, really poised, and just do what he does, man, which is just stand tall and just kind of throw it down the field. I've seen a few, clips of him in practice. He was a top prospect coming out of college, so I just don't know what to expect of the team as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. So I will say I'm actually very high on Matthew Stafford this year. I don't know how much the Rams are going to win. I'm very nervous about their depth. We already saw it with the Akers going out, that leaves Henderson as a lone back. I really like Henderson, but they're really thin, but I do think they're going to throw. I think this offense is going to, put up numbers. So like Matthew Stafford always does, I think the numbers are there, and I might bump him up a little more. I'm the same way with Jared Goff. I think he could essentially be Matthew Stafford in Detroit. Lots of meaningless numbers, not much wins. I don't think I'd bump him up necessarily into that sort of middle pack where I'd put Stafford sort of right underneath the elite, maybe right underneath a Russell Wilson type in there, But I would not be scared to take a flyer in those late rounds on Jared Goff just to see if I could maybe just get some free numbers there for a team that just has really going to focus on losing, I think, for most of the year. So free numbers and not much pressure.
I tell you one thing, if I completely drafted my team and I had a slew of running backs, maybe not top tier running backs, but one really good running back, a couple of decent running backs, guys that are going to get a few touches, and I had some good receivers and a really good tight end. I wouldn't be opposed to taking a guy like Jared Goff, and then maybe later on the season if he starts producing, you can put him together with a couple of those running backs and get yourself someone elite. So that's one thing, by the way, that I did a lot of. I did a lot of trades. I prided myself in my ability to make trades. So that's where my mind immediately goes to is, what can I bundle this guy with and send him off somewhere else?
Yes, the Daryl Morey of fantasy football. Dak, meanwhile, I don't know if I'm worried about the shoulder injury. It does concern me that they sent him over to the Texas Rangers. When you start looking at that they're the advice for pitchers every time their shoulder hurts usually means go get Tommy John surgery. So that makes me a little nervous. I don't think we're getting to those depths yet. But as much as I like this Cowboys team, and I drafted Dak Prescott last year and was reaping the awards until his ankle shattered.
It's your fault.
Yes.
It was your fault.
Until his ankle shattered into 1,000 pieces. But I just put him on my no draft list just because I want to see how he bounces back from that ankle injury. Already stuff starting to knick-knack in this preseason. I just, where you have to draft him, I would just not want to take that risk. I just think they're safer bets in, say a Lamar Jackson, in a Matthew Stafford, even like a Matt Ryan, who you aren't going to love, and your team is going to look weird with Matthew Ryan atop. But guess what? You're getting 35 touchdowns and probably about 4,500 yards passing. So it is what it is. I was curious about anyone else you had on your probably stay away from list.
I mean, haven't really composed myself a stay away list. There's more guys that I thought that could be sleepers. Now, it's hard to really call like Matthew Stafford a sleeper because he's in LA and he gets a lot of attention, especially after that big trade, with Detroit and the Rams. So I don't really have a stay away from list, but I guess if I had to just off the top of my head give you a guy that I thought I'd probably stay away from, I would probably have to go with anybody in the Jets organization.
Well, I was going to get to rookies later. I had a couple guys. Dak was one of them. I'm on a definite stay away from Ben Roethlisberger based on last year. I think everybody probably already knows that, but you see his name and you might think some sort of past glory is going. But
I heard he showed up to training camp and he was slim and ripped, man, slim and ripped.
Well, yes. That's fine until game 4 after he gets hit for the 55th time and his body no longer functions. And then a couple other guys I was looking at. The word is Carson Wentz is coming back week 1 now. But I'm not touching Carson Wentz. That's just that's the ambulance signal.
Listen.
Right next to you the whole year long, and you reading stuff all year long about how he's nicked and dinged.
We talked about this a little bit during the offseason. I feel that if Carson Wentz can bring back to his, Philly days, his glory days, as we call it, granted, he's not the reason why they won the Super Bowl, but he's the reason why they got to the Super Bowl. And I feel like if he can get back to that type of level, or at least close to it, they're going to be a dangerous team. Again, a lot of it's going to depend on his play, though. That's the only concern.
Yeah, I had one more guy I'd probably stay away from, and that's Jimmy G. I just don't know how that situation in San Francisco is going to break down. I think Shanahan's probably a little antsy to get Trey Lance in there, probably thinking he's a bit of a genius and can throw whatever quarterback back there. So I just don't know how long that leash is going to be on Jimmy G. So I just wouldn't touch him. Also, he always has the little ambulance symbol next to him as well. I think there's been one season that he's managed to complete out of his whole career. So those were a couple guys I was sort of definitely on the stay away from. Couple rookie guys I wanted to get into, and then one, he played a couple games towards the end of the year, but he's a little bit of a rookie as well. Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Wilson, Fields, Lance, Mac Jones. Do you have any of those guys you'd take a chance on, or you're staying away from rookies here?
Okay, now I listen, and this is not to say that no rookie has ever had success, no rookie quarterback has ever had success in fantasy. It's happened before. I just don't think that when you're committing yourself for a long-term season. Now, if we're talking about weekly fantasy, yes, if the matchup is right and they've been producing for a couple of weeks, maybe you take a flyer on one of these guys. Now, for a season-long fantasy football, which is what I think we're talking about here,
Yeah.
I'm personally staying away from all these rookie quarterbacks. And it's not to say that you're not going to have a Justin Herbert there who's going to put up ridiculous numbers for a rookie quarterback. When I look at these rookie quarterbacks and what they have around them, none of them really stand out enough to make me take a flyer on any of them. So I'm staying away from rookie quarterbacks, but I'm not completely convinced that there won't be one or two breakout stars.
Yeah, the only one that mildly intrigues me is Trevor Lawrence. I think his skill level is, way, way up there. I don't know where he's going, compared to what I take him as. I just probably wouldn't do it. But if he fell to the late rounds and I could just grab him as a flyer, I might take a run at Trevor Lawrence. I will admit, Jalen Hurts intrigues me just based on the rushing.
I liked him last season, and you kept criticizing me about it. Now you're on the bandwagon.
Well, I like running quarterbacks. Whether he could throw, I don't know. But I like those runners because that's just free yardage. I think they'll use him in goal line situations, which is important. Real compact, strong guy. I look for him to really maybe get a handful of touchdowns. So I'd be a little intrigued by Jalen Hurts if he was hovering around. None of the rest really light my fire. Jones, Lance, or Fields. So that's about where I sit on the quarterbacks. You ready to move to your position of love, the running back position?
Before we do, I just want to say really quick, while you were talking about Trevor Lawrence, it kind of intrigued me a little bit. So I looked up his average draft pick spot, whatever.
Yeah.
He's QB 14.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's at least 20, maybe 22 guys I'd rather have than Lawrence. This is no, dirt on him or his skill. Like you said, he's a very talented quarterback. He's got the skill set. He's got the arm to throw just about any type of ball. So this is nothing against him or his potential. It's just we haven't seen it in the pros yet.
Yeah,
there's at least 22 other quarterbacks that we've seen something from. Like I would probably feel a little more comfortable taking a guy, even though I wouldn't take him, a guy like Herbert. I don't know. Maybe it's been that long since I've played. I don't know.
No, that's what I was saying. Where he's being drafted, I don't think there's value there because you're in the unknown. And certainly the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season, I'm not looking for him to, start lunching 5 touchdowns. If you had Herbert, he wasn't even starting the first week of the season. He didn't even really get going until week 6, 7, and 8. So I would not take him unless he was way, way towards the end. Now his auction price is a little cheaper than his, draft position price. So, $1, $2, $3 in an auction, I'd probably be a little more willing than I would, to draft him that high in a snake draft.
Yeah, in a situation like that, it definitely makes a lot more sense.
All right, on to the running back. So I see about, I go 6 guys for sure. I'd be willing to take a chance on in the first round, and I might even increase that to about 8. I'm curious what guys you're seeing that you put on the elite level in the running back position.
Elite?
Yes.
Really, there's only two, maybe three guys that I've got up there. Um, and even then, I'm a little iffy about it. Um, I don't know if you want me to get into my list or do you want to
Well,
kick it off?
I was going to go with Cook, McCaffrey, Henry, for sure. I think you put Kamara in there too. So that's four. I definitely think so. The Packers just signed Aaron Jones to a very, very large deal. So I'm assuming they will run him into the ground a little bit, especially early on as, Rodgers works his way into the season. The ones I'm Ezekiel Elliott and Austin Eckler. I'm curious your thoughts probably on those two, because I think we could probably both agree. Cook, McCaffrey, Henry, Kamara. If those guys are there, you probably take them.
Yes, if they're there, you take them. Now, this is where I throw my curveball at you. Or
It's not
my
Darrell Henderson, is it?
Oh no. Although I will say this while we're on that subject, I think Henderson is actually slightly better than Akers, and I don't think people give him enough credit. So I'm
Yeah,
not too
I
concerned
agree.
about the running
I
back.
like Henderson a lot.
But as far as the running back, this is where I don't want to call it a curveball. We're talking football here. Curve pigskin. If that makes any sense. Anyways,
The no look Mahomes.
there you go. That sounds good. Here's my no look Mahomes. I'm not sold on McCaffrey. Okay, I
Oh,
I know I'm gonna get hate. I know I'm ready. I can hear it. Bring it on. I can hear it. Here's my reasoning behind it. We saw the emergence of another running back last season during the absence of McCaffrey, and I think with that, the fact that the coaching staff knows that, listen, our offensive line is probably a big reason. Our schemes, our blocking, our gaps, all these things play into the success of the running back. Now, I'm not saying McCaffrey isn't a great running back, because he is. You can definitely feel when he's not in the game. But I think that they probably pull back a little bit on his touches, and not so much because he can't handle it, but to preserve him for the long run. Because I think that right now he's one of the faces of that franchise, and it probably serves them better to kind of keep him healthy as long as possible. It would be a disaster, and I'm sure you agree with this. It would be a disaster for the entire organization if he were to go down again for an entire season.
yeah,
So
definitely so.
I have a feeling that they're probably going to limit his touches, especially early on. Maybe as it progresses, you can find a way to maybe get him on cheap as you get closer to the playoffs in a trade. For who knows what, but you could probably get him in a trade later on, and maybe his stats will pick up as the season progresses. But I'm not completely sold on him. For my book, I'm a little bit more excited about Saquon coming back. One, because I still remember how explosive he was before his injury, and I saw a lot of improvement from the Giants offensively last season. I think as the season progressed, we saw them put up some really tough games against tough teams with some really good defenses, like that Bucks game that comes to mind. The Super Bowl champions, the eventual Super Bowl champs. They went at it, man, and that was a dogfight. So with the improvement of that offense, adding a guy like Saquon, I think is only going to increase the offensive production for that team. So I'm excited about getting him back. Um, Derrick Henry. I mean, I don't really need to say anything about him, the king. He put up what a ridiculous amount of yards. He's getting another weapon at the wide receiver position that's only going to open up, a bigger hole for him because now you have to account for that big body on the outside. So those are the guys that I'm excited about. McCaffrey, I like him. He's great. I'm just not as high on him as most people are.
Yeah. I think if you're in a non PPR, that's all right. I probably would lower him down a little bit, but I think they probably will more reduce his load, more on the carry in than the catch in. So I think if you're in a PPR league, you're probably safe because that's probably 80 catches there just on dump passes and, just little swing and quick routes. So, other than the injury problems last year, the previous years he was lights out. Cook and Henry, I really have up there. Same with Kamara. A couple
Let me
guys.
ask you this real quick. Sorry to cut you off. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this. If you're in a PPR league and you've got two guys sitting there and it's your pick, you've got Kamara and you've got McCaffrey. Who are you taking?
Who's the quarterback for the Saints?
Sorry to put you on the spot. I'm assuming it's Winston. That's what I'm assuming.
See,
With the eye surgery, remember he got LASIK.
I'd probably still go McCaffrey. You probably go Kamara, don't you?
Yeah, I would definitely go Kamara. For a couple reasons. One, I think he's well, we've seen him, more recently, so I know what I'm getting from him as far as last season goes. Two, the loss of Drew Brees, I think is really gonna make Peyton kind of open up the playbook and kind of get really creative with a lot of his play calling. And I think Kamara is very versatile, so you can use him for just about anything. Not saying that McCaffrey isn't, but Kamara, I think most people would agree he's just a different type of running back. So
I'm probably going to flip-flop here on you. I might go Kamara, but I need the Michael Thomas situation to play out a little more. He's clearly going to miss the first couple weeks, but there's been some, let's say, mercurial, cryptic tweets coming out of him. So that situation
I've seen some of those.
Could get weird. And you start to take Michael Thomas off the Saints, then you're switching out Drew Brees. Basically, you're looking at a Christian McCaffrey situation with Alvin Kamara, and you haven't really had the same health problems, So maybe I would go Kamara, 2 weeks down the line if the Thomas situation keeps getting weirder and weirder. So I will say this: I don't think you could probably go wrong with either. So
yeah, that you have a point there. But I mean, come on, man. I know that there's a California sign here in my background, because California's in my heart. That's where I'm from. But come on, man, we're in Tennessee. You got your UT boy. Come on, you got to take Kamara.
Yeah, he originally went to Alabama and then transferred to Tennessee.
I don't want to hear that, and I'm sure nobody here in Tennessee wants to hear that either. So.
All right. A couple guys I'm intrigued with, ones who I think could jump in to that list. The first one that I'm going to talk to you about, Jonathan Taylor, especially if Wentz is hot and cold. Towards that end of the year, Taylor really started to chew up ground. They really started to milk him heavy. That offensive line I really like, and I think just with the indecision, you aren't going to know with Wentz. And if they decide not to get a backup quarterback, and we are having the Jacob Eason experience or whatever other terrible backup quarterback is past Eason, I think there's going to be a lot of Jonathan Taylor and a lot of leaning on that defense to really shorten games. So I would put really Jonathan Taylor, my personal self, probably ahead of a Joe Mixon and an Austin Eckler. I put him right around in that Aaron Jones category. I'm curious on your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor.
I agree with you for the most part. I think that, because of the type of play that they had some success last season. And a lot of it wasn't because of the quarterback. In some instances, even with the quarterback making a lot of mistakes, it was the running back position. It was their play that really kept them in games. It was that defense, really solid defense and a really solid running game. It felt like a lot of old school NFL type play that kept them in a lot of these, matches that they were in. Now, obviously, this is a new quarterback with a different style. But I mean, I don't see how it changes much as far as the running backs go. So I expect at least what we saw last season, if not better, with another year under their belt. Let me ask you this. I have this guy ahead. Would you put him ahead of a Nick Chubb?
Well, he was the next one I was going to bring up. I think we both love Nick Chubb. I think we'd probably put him in that rushing wise in that, Cook, Henry category, just a pounder and a great running back.
Yeah, very old school.
The problem I have with that is, they still have the Kareem Hunt there. And so you basically take away all catches out of the whole equation with Nick Chubb. And then, if for whatever reason they don't feel like Nick Chubb's running well, you go to Kareem Hunt and you just got that little offset a little bit. But I probably rate Jonathan Taylor a little higher, but I really like Nick Chubb, and I'd definitely be aggressive towards grabbing a Nick Chubb. I'm curious if you think maybe Kareem Hunt will be faded out a little bit more this season.
I think they will slowly start to kind of edge him out of the picture. I think that they really believe that Nick Chubb is their guy. I think that they believe that he can do just about anything they want him to do, whether it be catching from the backfield or running the ball, just pounding it down the middle. I think he can do just about everything. He's a really, really, really good running back. To me, this situation kind of reminds me a little bit of the Aaron Hernandez and Gronkowski situation that we had in New England several years back. And I remember telling my brother, because my brother used to play in one of my leagues, and he was concerned about drafting one of these two guys. And I remember telling him, listen, go back and look at the numbers, okay? Numbers don't lie. And both of these guys were producing, regardless of how great the other one was. The other guy was still producing. And it's a similar type of situation here, although all different position and different circumstances. Both of the guys were still producing. Maybe not to the same level, but both of them were producing. So I wouldn't be too concerned about a guy like Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt taken from Nick Chubb's plate. So I'm not really worried about it, but I do think that they'll start kind of phasing Hunt a little bit out.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to get your thoughts on another guy, DeAndre Swift. Really, really been going really high and pretty pricey in auctions. I am not a huge fan of DeAndre Swift. I didn't love him in college. I just don't totally see it. I don't get it. I'm curious where you put DeAndre Swift and where you think his value lies in drafting him. Do you think he's, overall he's been going tail end first, early second round. And I don't think I'd make that reach. Certainly not for a Detroit Lions team that is going to be behind a majority of the time as well.
I think a lot of it plays into the fact that who are the big weapons for the Lions when it comes to wide receivers? Jared Goff is gonna more than likely have to play from behind a lot. Of course, I'm saying this, and he'll probably lead them to the Super Bowl now, but
if the Lions end up in the Super Bowl, you should probably put money on it right now, because you could be a very rich man, and you will no longer have to do your day job. That
it probably won't happen, and I'm sorry, Lions fans, but it probably won't happen. But like you said, they're probably going to be coming from behind in a lot of these games, and Jared Goff is not really known for being the type of quarterback who dumps off to his running backs a lot. If anything, we see him trying to force passes to wide receivers when he really shouldn't. There were several instances last season where we saw him throw into triple coverage. So, I understand why he's going to where he's going, because running backs are scarce. And he is considered, and for people who are not watching and listening, I'm using air quotes, he's considered a top prospect running back. So, obviously, a lot of that still remains to be seen, especially with Jared Goff in their helm. I understand where he's going, why he's going where he's going. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with it. And I would advise people not to feel comfortable taking him either.
Yeah.
Not where he's going.
I'd much rather, who's a little lower, I'd much rather have a J.K. Dobbins or Antonio Gibson. I think both those guys proved last year that they were pretty solid guys. Baltimore sort of cleared the way for Dobbins to take over fully. Gibson, it's a little more hot and cold. You never know what's coming out of that Washington football team, but I really liked him towards the tail end of the year.
See, and I'm sorry, and actually flip-flop from what you think. I actually like Gibson a little bit better.
Yeah.
I think the situation in Baltimore it can be a little confusing at times, especially with is the running back going to run the ball or is the wide receiver going or is the quarterback going to run the ball? I think that until I see some sort of continuity there, I don't feel comfortable with a Baltimore running back. But that's just me.
Yeah. And honestly, you'd be a stretch and you might get laughed at a little bit, but I think I put Darrell Henderson ahead of him. Now, that being said, I'm a very big Darrell Henderson fan. I loved him at college. I just thought he was awesome at Memphis. I was actually really, really excited when he got drafted by the Rams. I think I told him about him 2 or 3 years ago to you. I was like, this guy, he runs that style that McVay likes. Now, he's slowly been worked in. I thought he was really good last year when he was healthy, and they decided to run the ball. I thought at times they sort of, decided to toss little passes to Cam Akers a little too much. And I thought they could pound Henderson a little more than they did. But with Akers out this year, I really think Henderson can get a big role. It would be very scary to take him, up there in the, Swift, Chubb Jacobs territory. But I'm confident enough in his skill level that I wouldn't be afraid to do it. And I have probably Swift lower than Darrell Henderson. So that's just my thinking.
I definitely do, but again, I didn't want to mention it because as a Ram fan, I think everybody kind of expects that anyway. So, but me trying to be non-biased, I think that Cam Akers' success last season, if you really looked at the games, he was really good in a couple of games, and then he was okay in other games. But I think the moments that he had were so explosive that it drew everybody to want to get him the ball a little bit more. But if you really looked at entirety of last season, I think that Henderson was the most consistent back. I think that he's the ideal type of running back that for Sean McVay's system. I think that having a guy like Matthew Stafford out there is probably going to help him because players know, defenses know, coaches know Matthew Stafford can sling the ball. Say what you want to say about him winning and losing games, he can sling the ball, and that's going to make defenses respect the passing game a little bit more. And not to mention the fact that, in my opinion, you probably have a really solid core of wide receivers with the Rams. Maybe not a big name, like your Julio Jones is and things like that, or your Hopkins, but as a whole, I think that wide receiver unit is really strong, and it's only going to open up more lanes for him. So I think he's going to have a sneaky, quiet, good season.
Yeah, definitely so. Couple guys I'm curious what your thoughts are on. David Montgomery really, really came on with the Chicago Bears last year after they proceeded to ignore him for, I think, the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. And we were, I think, both a little confused by that strategy. I don't know if that situation is much better. I don't know if you checked out their depth chart, but currently they don't really have a left tackle on the team. Sort of an important position, not going to judge. But anyway, do you think David Montgomery can repeat that sort of tail end of what he did last year? Or are you sort of looking at it with a little bit of a stay away, and if he falls to you late, you grab him, but you wouldn't move him up your draft board any?
Now, if I was picking for myself, I'd feel comfortable picking him up, okay? If I was giving somebody advice, I'd be a little cautious, simply because, like you said, that offensive line, we don't know what we're going to get. We don't know what it's going to look like. Even if they were to shift some guys around, you're going to have guys that played in a different position last season, played a complete different scheme. The blocking techniques are different. Not just that, the guy across from you, the guy you face up against is different. You're used to getting, for example, a nose tackle coming, and now you're getting, a linebacker or a defensive end or a corner coming from, from the edge. It's very different. So it makes me a little weary, but I think he can, if they can get that offensive line under control, I think that he can produce what he did last season, maybe match it, maybe even do a little bit better, because he wasn't in the best of positions last season. Like you said, there were so many games when I felt, and you said it before, like they should have fed him the ball a little bit more. Like he could have really had an impact in the game, and it seems like they really went away from it when they shouldn't have. So maybe with this new era of Bears football, uh, it changes things up a little bit. But again, for myself, I wouldn't be concerned. For advice, I'd say be a little cautious.
New era of Bears football.
The monsters of the Midway.
Oh, all right. We're going to go a little bit the other way with somebody who I think disappointed both of us. Devin Singletary, falling pretty far down those depth charts. Zach Moss should be back. So I'm assuming they're splitting carries, but I didn't see a ton from Zach Moss, even though I really liked him out of Utah last year. Let's just go over all that Buffalo situation. Would you take a chance on either of these guys? I mean, that offense, I'm assuming, is going to be lights out, but I was so disappointed in Singletary last year, and I just didn't see enough from Moss that unless they really, really fail late and I'm just, filling out my bench on the tail end of a draft or, throwing up a dollar or two bid at the end, I must stay away on these guys. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Definitely. I'm staying away from them. I think all of last season, we were both kind of expecting them to eventually have a breakout game that would set the pace for them going forward. Especially on a team like the Bills with such a potent offense, such a great leader in Josh Allen. You expected to see some sort of, of life coming out of that running back, out of that backfield. And it seemed like they were on life support, if anything. I don't know if a lot of it had to do with the coaching staff being like supremely enamored with Josh Allen's ability to run the ball that they felt we don't have to go to the running backs. But even when they got their shots, it felt like they were just flat-footed. It didn't feel. I didn't see the explosiveness that I expected from him. I was really disappointed. I was hopeful that he would turn it around at some point during the season, and just never came into fruition. I think that their season and postseason probably could have been a little bit different had that running game improved a little bit. But I'm staying away.
Yeah. I'm going to give you two rookies. Travis Etienne and for sure Najee Harris. People fall in this trap of drafting some rookies really high. I remember people were taking like Fournette in the first round. Harris hasn't climbed quite up that high, but I do think Najee will be productive for this Pittsburgh team. Hopefully they try to run the ball a little more. But I'm just curious if you think Najee or Travis Etienne can really make an impact this year, and where do you sort of value those two guys?
Listen, as far as Najee is concerned, maybe I was really high on Pittsburgh last season, and this is the team as a whole. I thought that Big Ben would probably help out the running situation there. And it seemed like it started to in the beginning, but teams really caught on really quickly. And who knows, maybe he took one too many hits early on, and it just kind of really steadily degraded as the season progressed. I think Najee can help, but I think that I'm probably staying away from that situation just because I don't know what I'm getting from the Pittsburgh offense as a whole. And that's a little scary. I think that if we had an old Ben Roethlisberger, from his younger days, I'd feel a lot more comfortable because he would open up a lot of lanes for the running back. But the fact that people have caught on to Roethlisberger and he's getting older and he's getting a little bit slower, not that he's still not talented, he's still talented, and he's still got that brain, which is probably the most important, part of a quarterback's body. I feel like it's too risky. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to taking him in later rounds as maybe your running back 3 or your backup running back for a bye week, but I definitely wouldn't take him as one of my starters.
Yeah, I think there's a really solid value in ATN in PPRs for sure. I think he'll get some pass catches. The thing people were probably not paying a ton of attention, but James Robinson, who's still there and still technically their starting running back, had a really good year last year. It was really, really solid for most of the year. I'm sure, he won't get quite as many chances with ATN there. But back end, I might take a flyer on ATN getting, 40, 50 catches on the year. Fill in if you got injuries or, you're on a bad bye week and you need some guys in there. I don't quite know where to rate Najee Harris. I don't know if I'd be bullish on grabbing him in the first or second round, but, third, fourth, fifth, if you're running back light, I think you might have to grab him because I think the touches will be there, and you touched on it earlier. Basically, you want guys who are going to get the ball, and I assume he's going to get the ball. So I'd go there. Curious, do you have any other busts or sleepers you like this year in the running back side of things?
No, my sleeper was like I mentioned earlier was Henderson. I think that he's probably in line to have a pretty decent season as long as he can stay healthy and as long as Matthew Stafford is what he's being advertised as. So that was my sleeper for this season was Henderson.
Yeah, I got two guys I'm looking at. Myles Gaskin had a pretty productive year when he was playing for the Miami Dolphins. I think that offense will be really improved a little bit. And then I'm curious about Miles Sanders. When he plays, he's really, really good. The question is always when he plays. So if Miles hovers in there, I feel like they're going to run the ball a lot. So I take a little chance on Miles there. So that would probably be two. And then the Ohio State rookie that's on San Francisco, Trey Sermon. If anybody has watched Raheem Mostert play, while he's a very talented back, he plays in 2-game stretches, healthy for 2 games, out for 4 games. So if
not to mention the facts, I keep cutting you off. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
Not to mention the fact, it's just I had to bring this up because my brother would kill me if I didn't. He's a big Niner fan, but it seemed like the Niners pretty much had a plug and play system pretty much all of last season when it came to the running back position. Whether it was more or anyone else, they were producing. So I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, that would be the other thing. The Niners do seem to have a pretty much plug and play. So someone who was as talented as Sermon, little inconsistent, I think could definitely come in there and maybe shock you. I don't know if you quite have to draft him. I'm sure people are getting him as a handcuff to Mozart. So I'd be on the lookout at that. I definitely wouldn't take him until my back end of the draft. I hate drafting backup running backs early, just so you have the quote unquote handcuff, especially when they're like productive guys sitting the waiver wire. But I would take a decent look at Trey Sermon in there. That San Francisco 49ers, I think they could put you back there and you could probably get about 600 yards. So
listen, if they're listening, give me a call. I'll do it.
I don't know if you could break the 1,000 mark, but I think you could get 600.
Listen, I may have a little bit of gas left in these old wheels here. I think I could pull out maybe 600.
I feel you'd be on that questionable injury list pretty quickly.
Yeah, 1 game in, that's it. I'm retiring.
All right, let's move on to the wide receivers. Really, really deep position here. Interesting. Probably Diggs, Hill, Adams, Hopkins, your mainstays up there. I'm curious if you take any of these guys in the first round. I think I'm a no-go for pretty much everyone as a first-round draft pick, but people are going to do it. So I'm curious where you stand.
I mean, there's really a couple of guys that I wouldn't blame people for taking them in the first round. Now, again, this goes to if we're playing on a 12-team league or a 14-team league, I wouldn't blame them if they drafted a wide receiver in the first round, a guy like Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, guys that you know are going to produce pretty much all season long. Basically, you can put them in your starting lineup and not worry about it until they're on a bye week. Those type of guys, I wouldn't be so opposed to drafting him in the first round. But any wide receiver other than that, well, there's a handful of other guys. But for the most part, even those guys, if I could get away with not drafting them in the first round, I'm not drafting them in the first round. The wide receiver pool is deep. And I'm talking about deep. There's guys that you don't even know of, guys you haven't even heard of, that are probably going to get you 10 points a week. My rule for fantasy always was, if a guy can get me double digits, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's what I hope for. If he can give me double digits, I'm fine, because I know that my main guys, my core group of starters, are going to give me the bulk of my points. So that was always my golden rule: was any player that can give me double digit points, I'm good with. And I feel like the wide receiver pool, there's plenty of guys that can get you double digit points.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, you could theoretically wait till fourth, fifth round, and grab a Kenny Galladay, grab an Adam Thielen, like back to back, and you got Galladay and Thielen as your two receivers there, and I don't think anybody would hate against that. I mean, if you really, really want guaranteed production, you might go after a Hill or a. Uh, I don't even know if I'd put Diggs guaranteed production. I mean, he's been a really good receiver and he looked great in Buffalo, but I don't think consistently I'd be willing to launch that first round pick out there over an elite running back or, a guaranteed, 40 touchdown passes from a Patrick Mahomes. But this field is really, really, really deep. Couple guys I'm curious about where you see maybe I'd go a little overvalued. I don't know if you can argue with Diggs, Hill, Ridley, Adams. Those are probably the top four guys. I think those are pretty much stable. You know what you're getting. But DeAndre Hopkins, I'm a little curious about. I thought there was a little bit of droppage last year in maybe his elite skill level. Now, some of that might have been, going to the Arizona team, maybe Kyler Murray isn't quite the type of thrower that can get him there. But I saw a little bit of a drop last year. I'm curious if you'd still put Hopkins up there with those, really top rung guys.
You know, I would. Okay, and my reasoning behind it is, it's another year of continuity between those two guys. It's another year of them knowing what to expect from each other, and we saw it a lot in that one game where, who was it, against Buffalo, with the Murray, as they call it. You could see that there's trust there. Now, a lot of times, trust takes a long time to develop, especially between a wide receiver and a quarterback. Um, but I think that they're getting there. And even though there was a bit of a drop off last season, at least to the eyeball test, stats wise, I think he still had a pretty good season. But to the eyeball test, there was a little bit of digression there. I expect them to improve a little bit more this season. Again, like I mentioned earlier, they brought in a couple other weapons that might help out. Maybe limit his double coverages and things like that. So I do expect him to be slightly better this season, and be a little bit more of an upswing. But even then, the Cardinals offense, it makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I might separate him a little bit and put him more in the sort of Keenan Allen, AJ Brown type category, where there might be some weeks where you get some duds. Now, pretty much consistently you'll get good weeks, but there might be a couple where you're like, why do I have 2 points from my lead wide receiver? Another one where
because Aaron Donald got 10 sacks.
Yeah, another one. This probably won't make Dynamite too happy, but I'm curious where you have him. Julio Jones makes his move to Tennessee. I've seen a lot of sort of drop there. I don't think he's going to be quite the explosive threat that Tennessee thinks they're getting. I think in this sort of deep wide receiver category, I put him as a middle of the pack sort of type wide receiver. I'm curious if you still have him up in that upper tier category.
Okay, so I don't have him as an elite wide receiver anymore. And it's not because of production, because I feel like whenever he's on the field, he's producing. The reason I don't have him up there is because of injury concerns. It seems like over the last couple of seasons, the injury concerns have been more consistent than his time on the field has been. So that's really my biggest concern with him, is can he stay healthy an entire season? If he can stay healthy for an entire season, being on a team like the Titans where you have an elite quarterback based off last number of seasons, last season's numbers, sorry, and the previous season, you could definitely make the argument that he's an elite quarterback. You definitely have an elite running back there. It's something that even though he's had a really good quarterback with Matt Ryan, the running game has been kind of wishy-washy in Atlanta. So having a guy like Derrick Henry is definitely going to help him out. Now, can he stay healthy long enough for it to turn into actual production? That's the question mark that I have, and that's the only reason that I'm a little concerned, a little cautious about picking up a guy like Julio Jones. But I think the talent's still there. I think he's still got enough in that tank to really make an impact. Again, it depends on how healthy he can stay.
Yeah, it concerns me because it's been about 2 years now where he's on the field for a play, he's off the field for a play because his hamstring's acting up. We see it getting rolled out every 5 snaps, and I'm just like, what? Maybe that's hamstrings healed, but it's been bugging him for 2 years, and I just worry that it's starting to really, really hurt him. We talked a little bit about Dak. I'll go to the really 3 Cowboys receivers, but we'll go to the 2, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. I think fully healthy, you saw it last year, that's just a lights out offense. Are you dropping them any? Thinking there'll be a little bit of a window here where Dak sort of has to get his sea legs back, and maybe they try not to play quite as, open up to protect the defense a little more. Maybe it's not quite as offensively as powerful as it was, towards the tail end of 2 years ago into last year before Dak got hurt.
Well, it's interesting, football's one of those team sports where the absence of one guy really impacts a lot of different positions. When we saw Prescott go down last season, we saw a huge drop off at the running back position. It seemed like Elliott just wasn't producing. He wasn't finding those holes. And even when he was finding those holes, it just seemed like he wasn't motivated to really hit those in full stride like we're so accustomed to seeing from him. But a guy like CeeDee Lamb, for example, I feel like his production didn't suffer as much from the lack of Prescott there. And I think because he's very versatile, you can put him in the slot, you can move him to the outside. He can be your quick route guy, the guy who you dump it off to in case you're in a hurry, which we saw a lot of last season with the Cowboys. I think that it's going to be a little bit, probably a couple games for everybody to kind of get back into the flow of things. But I think that once they get going, we know how dangerous that offense can be when that engine is humming. We know how potent they can be. So I'm not too concerned for the long run. If it was a daily fantasy type of thing, I'm probably staying away from Cowboys offense players for the first couple of weeks. But if it's for a season, if you can pick up one of these guys for cheap in the later rounds, I think you'd be doing yourself a good investment to grab one of these guys and kind of stash them for later on.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go to New England, where we haven't seen a lot of passing or a lot of good wide receivers for the last few years. They brought in some guys. Nelson Aguilar, probably the most known of that group. So I'm just curious, what do you see there out of New England? Nelson was really, really good for the Raiders last year. They bring him in. Jacoby Myers still there. N'Keal Harry sort of still there. Any production from these New England receivers, or are you still in stay away due to the fact that the quarterback might not be able to throw a football forward?
I need a second to process that. Okay, I'm good to go. Now, let me look around. Okay, my wife's not here. Stay away from any Patriot, okay? She's going to hate hearing this, but I don't think that we're going to get any production from the Patriots. I don't think that – I mean, it's Bill Belichick. I'm not going to, discount his genius because he's a great he's a great coach. He's a great quarterback whisperer, although we didn't really see it last season. I think that I don't know. They may surprise people, but as far as advice goes, I'm staying away, and I'm telling everybody to stay away from any Patriots wide receiver. I just didn't see anything from that position last season, and I didn't see anything from the most important position, which is a position that helps that position, the quarterback. I didn't see anything from it, and I don't see any improvement unless they can decide to. Because from what I've heard, uh, Cam is a starter, correct?
Yes, I'm pretty much sure he's going to at least start week one.
Now, if he starts, I'm staying away. Now, that's not to say that at some point they don't do the old switcheroo and bring in the guy who they believe is the future of that franchise. If that happens, then maybe the fact that NFL teams aren't quite ready for like a Justin Herbert type of situation, teams aren't quite ready for him to take the helm, then maybe the wide receiver production goes up, a little bit. But even then, I don't think it's enough to, require someone to draft one of these guys. These are guys that you can pick up off the waiver wire during a bye week if you really need, or if you start seeing some sort of production, it's a guy that I'd, be waiver wire shopping. I wouldn't draft any of these guys.
Yeah, Aguilar's intriguing, but the problem is he sort of made his name last year at the Raiders as a big downfield threat.
Yeah, who's going to get him the ball down deep?
Well,
Cam can't throw it 3 feet.
Maybe Cam is improved throwing between 5 and 10 yards, but I'm not going to buy that passes over 20 yards are going to start all of a sudden hitting the mark when that wasn't even his greatest skill set back when he was healthy and good. So I don't know. I just sort of moved Patriots, pretty much all of them, off my draft boards overall, other than maybe Damian Harris at running back. But even then you're starting to mess around with the New England running backfield, and that becomes a little scary.
Here's a sleeper for you from New England, the kicker.
They're
going to be kicking a lot of field goals.
All right. So any other guys you have on your sort of sleeper or bust list that you think might be worth either drafting or staying away from?
No, I like I said earlier, I think that the wide receiver pool is really deep, and I wouldn't concern myself too much if you can't grab one of those top 5, top 4 elite guys. I think that you'll probably be doing your team a better service drafting a bunch of middle tier guys in the later rounds because the position itself is really deep, and I think it's more important to fill holes with those other tougher positions like the running backs and things like that.
Yeah, I had a couple guys I really like. I don't know, sleeper's a stupid term now because everybody knows who every one of these guys is now. It's not like anybody doesn't know. But I look for Brandon Ayuk, the San Francisco 49ers guy, to make a little bit of a jump. I'm curious about Rashad Perriman. We talked about Jared Goff and the Lions. That's probably their number one receiving threat. I assume they're going to throw the ball pretty solidly. And when he was in Tampa 2 years ago, when he was the last of that receiving threat, him and Jameis Winston made a nice little connection there. Latavius Shenault out of Jacksonville. I've always really, really liked him. And then on the rookie side of things, I mean, everybody knows Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, all those Bama guys. But I'm actually looking at Rondale Moore out of Arizona. Little Purdue guy, little sort of explosive jitterbug out there that really can move and was really, really great for Purdue his freshman year and just sort of struggled, to stay healthy those last 2 years. But those are some guys I'm looking at, and I'd probably move up my draft board as a little bit of sleepers. All right, we're going to move to the last position. We're going to the tight ends. So tight ends, I think we all pretty much have one at the top, and then it sort of filters down. I'm curious if you I think you could talk Kelsey into yourself into taking Kelsey towards that back end of the first round. If you're going like receiver first round, Kelsey's and just as elite as any of those guys, and really the position difference between Kelsey and then you drop off into a Waller or a Kittle or a Hawkins sign is really, really different. But any other guys you're going to move into the Kelsey category this year? You got Kelsey and then a line and then a host a couple other guys.
Honestly, as far as the tight end position is concerned, for me, there's only three guys that I consider drafting whatsoever, and that's obviously Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller.
Yeah.
And after that, I think the drop off is pretty huge. I think that the tight end position has become probably more scarce than the running back position.
Oh, yeah.
But because the tight ends don't run the ball, because they're not getting as many touches as running backs are, even though that position is really scarce, it's not as important as the running backs are. That being said, I mean, if you can get one of those three guys, I think you're in good shape for the season, for the entire season. But if not, I think you're going to find yourself playing the matchup game when it comes to the tight end, going up against defenses who give up a lot of points to tight ends and things like that. Maybe, defenses that are lacking at the linebacker position or things like that, plug and play type of thing. Because I really think that if you don't have one of those three guys, I think that you're in a tough spot. You're going to find yourself making a lot of moves during the waiver wire.
Yeah. I'll go over a couple guys that I'm curious about. First off, we'll go with the rookie Kyle Pitts. Elite. Will probably be in that Travis Kelce class in a couple years. I'm just curious, would you waste, probably a third, fourth, fifth round pick on a Kyle Pitts based on maybe the capabilities of doing, making that leap so quick? I don't know if I'd go there quite this quick, but I mean, there's a ton of talent there. So I'm just curious where you would put Kyle Pitts in there, or would you just stay steady and maybe take a Mark Andrews, a Dallas Goedert, a Hawkins sign, guys who have proven it and you're going to get at least production ahead of him, or are you just jumping Kyle Pitts just right under the Kelsey Waller Kittle category?
No, I definitely have Andrews ahead. I think that as much as I like Pitts, I think Pitts is going to be a great prospect. We don't know. We haven't seen it on the field at a professional level yet. So that always makes me a little weary. Right now, before the season starts, I have Andrews slightly ahead. Now, I still wouldn't draft Andrews, and I still wouldn't draft Pitts. Now, if somehow he was still available on the board with your last pick, I don't see why you wouldn't take a guy like that, because we know that young quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks, all these young first year, second year, third year quarterbacks, they love those security blankets, whether it be a running back or a tight end, and it doesn't get much bigger as far as targets go than a tight end. That you're talking about a big safety blanket. You're talking about one of those weighted blankets that makes you feel really comfy and cozy and helps you go to sleep. That's what tight ends are. And that's probably what he's going to become. I think the potential and the ceiling are really high. But until I see a little bit of it, I don't feel comfortable like actually putting stock into wasting a pick for a guy like that. And again, the potential is definitely there for him to be really good and have a really good season. But until I see it, I'm just staying away.
Yeah, I don't think I'd grab him early, but I don't know if I could hate on someone who would do it, but it just, I don't think I could make that jump quite yet. But I'm going to give you a couple sleeper guys who I think I definitely grab late. If I didn't get my elite, I cut it off past actually Kittle. And if I don't get a Kelsey Waller Kittle, I cut it off. And then basically I'm grabbing stuff at the end because I'll just rotate and pick matchups. But a couple of guys I think could make a little bit of a jump here. I'm going to talk about Tyler Higbee, your guy. I've always loved Tyler Higbee. Everett's out of there now. He's up at Seattle, so it's just Higbee there. And if you look at a couple of the games that Higbee's played, when Gerald Everett has missed games, it's been Higbee's guest games, and we're talking like 770 with a couple touchdowns. He had a 100-yard game with about 8 catches in there when Everett didn't play. So I'm very curious if maybe with Everett out of there, finally we get a lot of Higbee. I know he's not, an elite level blocker, and McVay, likes to play that tight in there and have him stay in and block. But Higbee's just an explosive receiving threat. So I really think Higbee can make a jump there. So if you could grab him towards the end, I think you could get a little bit. And then Jonnu Smith, who's we just talked about not picking New England guys, but I said Cam might have improved on the 5-yard throws. I think if the 5-yard throws are going anywhere, they're probably going to Jonnu Smith. I know they signed Hunter Henry, but he's already a little banged up. And if you followed Hunter Henry, career, a little banged up is pretty much his motto. So I like Jonnu Smith there. I think he'll be a good end zone threat too. So those were a couple of guys I was looking in there. You could also throw Evan Ingram in there, but I think I'm about out on the Evan Ingram. We get the 4 really good games and then the about 10 worthless games. So Tyler Higbee and Jonnu Smith, I really think can make a jump, maybe not into that elite category, but up into that second tier category if things break right.
Yeah, as far as the Higbee thing is concerned, I'm the only thing that causes a little bit of pause for me is the fact that there's a new quarterback there. I know that Jared Goff really liked him. He was a big target for him. And there was even a couple of plays last season where they kind of handed it off to him for a running play, sorry. So he's very versatile. Like you said, he's not as good of a blocker as Everett was, but he does a lot of things and a lot of things pretty well. So he's got that going for him. I don't know what the relationship between him and Stafford's going to look like going forward. So that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause there.
Yeah. All right. Anything on the tight ends that you had? Sleepers, bust, big on Gronkowski, first, second round?
Yeah, I'm taking Gronkowski with my first pick. Just like the good old days.
Well, that's our fantasy football show. I think great icebreaker to start out the season. Like I said, we'll be back Friday to start our NFL team previews. We're going to start out with the AFC East and the NFC East. We'll get into some team previews. We'll be here every Friday for those. And then once the season starts, we'll have our back to our 2-show allotment. Tuesdays, we'll do a recap of the week. Fridays, we'll do our picks and previews. So a lot to look forward to. Be sure to look for us also on Football Time as me and the Dynamite continue our college football previews. We'll have another show out tomorrow, Thursday, as we break down the AAC and the Conference USA. So a lot going on. Football's in full bore. Also, soccer's getting ready to kick off. We might break down and have a soccer preview as those domestic leagues start. I don't know if the Achilles has been following the movement in the soccer leagues, but
I've got my soccer ball here. Oh, wait, no, that's not a soccer ball.
But all right, be ready for our preview. Anything you got to add, plug and play for us, Achilles?
Nope, we're just going back to last season. Don't forget, follow me on social media, Twitter, TD Achilles. You can follow me on Facebook under Achilles Reign. And I've also got a little TikTok thing that I started. I haven't posted anything yet, but as we get the season kicked off and get it rolling, we definitely get some videos on there, maybe some little gambling advice, things like that.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. That's our show. Be sure to follow all our podcasts on the greenlightnetwork.org. I'm Champ Chesterfield for Achilles Reign. That's our show, and we're out.
We're back, baby.